Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. This is the monthly Gita meetup. We've gone through Bhagavad Gita. And Joe, if you could go ahead and put the link to the playlist for Bhagavad Gita in the chat. It's been an amazing experience for many of us. This is a way of seeing what of it remains with us, having the opportunity to discuss. We'll be doing it once a month. And then we will take some themes and discuss them. So today, I'm going to kick it off with a bang, actually, with a really powerful theme that we've been discussing Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 3 days, the same theme in very different context. And that is the theme of foot washing. On Wednesday, we looked at the foot washing scene in Odyssey when Odysseus comes home after 20 years, disguised, and his nurse is washing his feet and discovers a scar and realizes that that is Odysseus. And Odysseus has to put his hand on her mouth to make sure she doesn't exclaim and reveal his identity until the time he is ready to talk about it. But, I mean, that's a minor thing, but we will connect it. So what I want to do is I want to look at these three cultures, three very different cultures: Greek culture, then the New Testament, and Bhagavad Gita. And we are going to look at foot washing scene. The main thing to compare this with is our Gospel of John meetups on chapter 13, where Jesus washes his disciples' feet. But what I want to do is I want to start off by just telling you the story, the third story, as a story. Okay, I don't know whether I'll be able to tell it because I'm going to try. It's such a wonderful story, such a moving story. Rupali, are you ready to jump in whenever you need to? Do you want to put on your video or you want to wait?
Sure, I can. I don't have my computer today, so I'll see if I can borrow a computer and join.
Sure.
Okay.
But you're listening to what is going on.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, I don't want you to miss anything.
Yep.
All right. Okay, folks. So you have to realize that Bhagavad Gita is part of this larger Mahabharata. It captures the core ideas of Mahabharata, but those ideas are spread across the entire Mahabharata. This is a story from the life of Krishna. This is a story of Krishna and Sudama. Krishna and Sudama both went to the same school. Now, the school in the Indian context is very different. So I will speak a little bit about the context because you can't really understand the story without the context. School, the way in which school worked at that time in India was you would go and stay with your teacher, your guru. It is called Gurukul system. And in the Gurukul system, all the students were equal. So there would be children of kings and children of Brahmins, children of Vaishyas. They would all come and they were all treated equally. So Sudama was son of a very poor Brahmin. And Krishna was, of course, son of a king. And they were learning together. They were the best of friends. They were inseparable growing up. They were, they had very close friendship growing up. This is from the age of, probably, I'm going to guess here, I'm not a scholar here, but maybe from 8 to 12, 13, something like that, or maybe a little bit later. If anybody has more data on this, they can correct this. But early childhood, and they were the best of friends. They were inseparable. When their education was finished, Krishna went to his kingdom to eventually become the king there. And Sudama went to his home, which was a very poor village, and it was one of the poorest families in the village. And time passed, maybe even like 20 years, 30 years. They didn't really interact. You don't realize that traveling in India is a very big deal. And distances, the only way, for example, for Sudama to travel is to walk. And it's a long walk. And so they lost touch with each other. Sudama married, he had children. And things were pretty bad. They were used to poverty, but then there was a drought, and they didn't have any food. His wife would say, you keep saying that you have this friend who is now king. Why don't you just go and ask him? He says, no, how can I do that to a friend? I don't want to take anything from my friend. He's my friend. So he would not do that. But then things got really bad, and his children were starving. And when his wife said to him, look, our kids are starving. I know you don't want to do this, but can you please? And he looked at his kids and he said, okay, I'll do it. Now, the tradition in the Indian context is that if you're going to somebody else's house, you take a present with you. Now, Sudama and his family is starving. What present can they give? And what they had is that they had just this handful of popped rice. This is like cornflakes, but version of rice, rice which is popped. It's the most simple, everyday thing. It so happened that Krishna thoroughly enjoyed that. And he knew, Sudama knew that from the childhood growing up with him. So he took a handful of that. That's all he had, and tied it in a little cloth and carried it with him under his armpit as he walked days to go visit Krishna. Now, Sudama was worried, it's like, okay, it's been 20, 30 years. Is Krishna going to remember me? And how can I, he's a king. I'm this just an ordinary guy. At this point, he has tattered clothes and he's really looking like nothing. So he's saying, how can I approach? What will he think? He probably would have forgotten me. And so, but he says, look, I have to do this, for my children. And so I will go. So he walks days and days, okay, without eating anything. He's hungry, but he wouldn't eat. He has this little thing that he's carrying with him. He wouldn't eat because that's for Krishna. So he walks, into Krishna's court. It is in the middle of a great feast. The entire court is there. And Krishna sees him walking in this giant hall. Okay, this is a giant hall. He sees him at the door. immediately recognizes him, goes running down, takes him by the hand, brings him to the throne, sits him on the throne, and starts to wash his feet because, she's been walking. That's, that's a way of welcoming people, and it's his friend. Krishna is just tremendously delighted. Sudama, he can't believe it. And he's also delighted. And they are all, he's giving him, they're all surrounded by this magnificent food. And here is Krishna. Everybody else is looking at them. Who is this guy? A beggar who suddenly, the king went running and put him on the throne, his own throne. And he himself starts to wash his feet. And, and they're, Krishna is talking to him all through this. And then he notices something, that Sudama is hiding something under his armpit. So he says, what did you get for me? The Sudama says, oh, it's nothing. Because he's seeing all this, just the choicest of foods, the richest of foods, all around him. And Krishna says, no. He's very mischievous, Krishna. And he says, you have to give me that. So he says, okay. And he takes this and he starts to eat it. And he's just extolling the praises of this most ordinary thing. Of course, they're friends. So they forget about everything else. Sudama spends days there, like almost a week, talking to Krishna. Krishna stops everything and he's spending time with Sudama. That's all they're doing. And then, of course, Krishna dresses him up in nice clothes, and he's, he says, okay, I have to go back to my family. This is so amazing. It's like, of course, Sudama is in seventh heaven. So is Krishna. And Sudama starts to walk back. Now this time, of course, Krishna gives him a chariot, so he doesn't have to walk. So he's on the chariot, going on the way back home. And he's nearing his home. He says, wait a minute. I forgot that I had gone to ask Krishna for something. Because he was so happy that he completely forgot about what he was there to do. So he says, and he's coming up to his village now. And he starts to, say, okay, now what is going to happen? What are we going to do? So it begins to dawn on him that, wait a minute, we are in big trouble, because I went all the way in order to ask something from Krishna, and then he forgot to ask. Okay. So he says, how am I going to explain this to my wife and my children? I've been gone. Like, it took me a week to walk. I spent a week there, and now I'm back with nothing. So he's in complete turmoil. And the chariot drives up to his home, and his home is not there. What Krishna has done is that in place of his little hut is this giant mansion. And he sees these beautiful children and a beautiful woman, and suddenly realizes, wait a minute, that's his wife and that's his children. So what Krishna did was that as soon as Sudama got there, he found out everything. He sent people to find out everything about him. He basically built an entire house for him, stocked it with the best foods and everything, gave him everything that he could have possibly wanted. And of course, his wife and his children are happy, and Sudama is happy, but that is the story of Krishna and Sudama. Now, I'm going to have Rupali add to it if you want. Rupali, what do you think? Did I do an okay job of telling this story? Rupali, I think you have your audio problem. Give me a second.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So I said, as usual, you did a fantastic job of telling the story. It's, children went to Gurukul in schools. It was a rite of passage from childhood to, from like infant to childhood. So around 6 to 7 years of age, they would go to Gurukul, and then they would stay with their guru. And Sudama and Krishna enjoyed a special friendship at the Gurukul. They played together, they did their chores together. As Shrikant said, because the children stayed with their guru, they had to do the daily chores also over there. And the thing is that Sudama and Krishna, although they hadn't seen each other for so many years, when they met, Krishna knew. And the friendship was so deep that they didn't really have to say anything. It was just, between the two of them, they just knew. So you have this contrast of the rich king and the poor Brahmin. Sudama was very knowledgeable. He knew all his shlokas very well, very sincere, whereas Krishna is this mischievous character. Even as a child, he would pull jokes on Sudama. And they just had a wonderful friendship together, just like many of us probably have experienced with our friends.
Thank you, Rupali. So folks, yes, next is Madhav, go ahead.
There's actually a small part one to this story too. So when they are in Gurukul, like Rupali said, they do all the chores together and everything. So the Guru, Sandipani, actually tasks Krishna and Sudama to go to the forest one day when they're kids, about 12, whatever the age is, to collect some wood. And on the way, they also, Sandipani, the Guru, gives Sudama the rice that Shrikant previously mentioned, Boa, or the flattened rice, for their travels and for them to come back. So when they get to the forest, there's a huge storm, so they can't make it back on at the same time. So they plan to just rest under a tree. At this time, Sudama is very hungry. Krishna is also very hungry, but Sudama has the food. So while the storm is going on, Sudama patiently waits until Krishna falls asleep, and then he starts eating. So his intention was to have the food for all himself. And but Krishna, obviously, he was pretending to sleep, or where he's Bhagavan, so he knows everything that's going on. So he knew that Sudama didn't share the food, but he didn't say anything. And I think that's why it is said, I don't know if this is true, that that's why Sudama lived a life of poverty. And then after, when he went back, there he actually offered the food with true intentions the second time. So it adds an aspect of forgiveness to this whole story.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Madhav. So what did you folks think of this story? So go ahead and type exclamation mark if you would like to make any comments about this story. We'll start with Evanik, followed by Cho. Evanik.
I thought the story was very beautiful. I think the part that struck me um, was the point where the poor man is, I can't pronounce his name yet, um, but he's going back and he remembers, oh, I was supposed to come here for my wife. And I'm sure he was worried. In the meantime, I was thinking, so from the moment he pretty much got there, Krishna set up his house. Like Krishna was sending people to set up his house, to make sure that his family is taken care of, and that he, like his family had every need met. And so, the week it took to get there, that was 1 week. And then the week he stayed there, from the moment he got there, Krishna had to send people back to take care of him. And I just thought, what what a great friendship that Krishna, like, not without saying anything, without having to know what he did. He didn't make an announcement. He didn't even tell his friend, look, I'm doing this for you. He just did it. And he didn't want the praise, he didn't want the honor, he just wanted to take care of his friend. And I think that's the mark of a beautiful friendship, and especially after not being in touch for like 20 years, um, just to pick up where you left off and to take care of him. It's just it's just a beautiful thing. So I just thought that was amazing, and it's an amazing story of friendship. And the foot washing is one thing, and I love the theme that it crosses over, but it's just taking care of your friend. That's what I got from it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Avineet. Next up is Joe. Joe.
The first thing and then this is just a side note, though, but it's amazing because the best friendships are ones where you don't see friends for 20 years and then you see them and it's like there's nothing else had ever gone by, like, no time has gone by. That's just a side note, though, because I've had that experience where you just see somebody and it's just like, wow. But I think that what there's two things that stick out to me. The first is the ability to provide and serve. The joy that actually comes with that is what, and the washing of the feet is beautiful, because it's saying, it's an offering in addition to, I can give you everything, but what I'm going to give you is the thing that, is I'm going to humble myself to you. And I think that it highlights the beauty of being able to give and to service and to humble yourself to someone else. That I guess there's an element of Sudama that had a little bit of pride at one point, where he didn't want to go and ask his friend. And I think that's it's a small part of the story, but it is part of the story. It's like kind of this, I don't want to necessarily go ask for help. And sometimes what we need to recognize is that when we don't ask for help, we deprive someone else of their ability to serve. And that's that's the one way sometimes to overcome our own personal pride, is that to look at it as you're depriving someone of an opportunity to have you as a friend, to give you a hug, to embrace you. Those are my initial comments. I think that there's also some, what did Madhav had actually added there. I was a little bit unclear with what that part, like where they were together in the forest and there was a flood, but we can kind of come back to that, because I do think that there may be another parallel with another biblical story of if there's an element of forgiveness involved, it could be similar to the prodigal son in a way too.
Mhm.
So
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Next up is going to be Brian or Penny or both.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I mean, it's a beautiful story and very touching. And to add kind of another part about Krishna and basically his awareness and somebody being aware of their friend's needs, because when he came in, you know, he was dressed like a beggar. You could tell he was probably exhausted, had been walking, and the only gift he had was this little bit of rice. So he had been afraid to ask, and he forgot when he saw Krishna, but Krishna could tell, you know, that he was in need, that there, you know, that obviously something had brought him to him, and he could see that that he had need. And so Krishna, you know, inquired and took care of that need, even though he didn't ever bring it up. And I just think that's beautiful that, you know, when somebody has a friendship and they're so aware of it, and then he didn't say anything to him because, you know, he was his friend, he was just helping, but that, you know, he was really aware of his friend, and probably maybe realized that the friend needed this, but had forgotten to, you know, didn't ask. So he provided it. I thought that was beautiful.
Wonderful. Does anybody else want to add anything? Okay. So I'll make a few comments here. Don't know. Joe, can you check if this person who is in the waiting room is registered? Is registered, you can let them in. Okay. So I want to make 3 points here. The first point is that of offering. Remember in Gita, there are places where Krishna is saying to Arjun, he's saying, just have devotion and offer what you have. It really doesn't matter whether it is a flower or these pohas, it doesn't matter what. It's the act of offering. The second part corresponding with that is that grace is always raining on you, and which is a much larger thing, and it is always raining on you. That was first point. The second point is that of relationship between God and man. Now you can look at Krishna and Arjun, and they are kind of interchangeable. You see, they're equals at one level. Yes, it is God and man, but they're equal in one very deep level. And that is what is shown here. Like the way in which Sudama and Krishna act when they are together is actually very similar to each other. So that equalness, and it doesn't matter the position, whether you're God or man, it doesn't matter whether you're a king or a beggar, it doesn't really matter. So that's the second point. The third point, I think, Joe's point about asking for help, that asking, you know, ask and you shall receive, is also a very deep point. So there are so many interesting points here. All right. So I want to go ahead, Joe.
you know, and again, the one parallel that we have with Christianity is this, again, Christ came to serve. You know, that's and then you see Krishna serving as well. And I know I've highlighted this already, but this is God, you know, that is serving man and or humanity. And I think that that's that is a profound point, especially if I mean, especially when considering that these are two separate stories being told, and that both people, like both stories, have arrived at the same significance of that, of understanding that God is here to serve. I know I didn't express that clearly, but anyway, sorry.
Sorry about that. Next up is Andrea. Andrea, go ahead.
Thanks. I just want to add something very small here, but in the line of serve and need. So I understand that by forgetting to ask for help, in a way, is when you're really a friend of somebody, you don't need to wait for your friend to ask you for need. You already understand, and you offer your help before the person asks for help. And I think that's one of the lessons here too, right? You don't need to wait for the other to ask for help when you're really friend of somebody. You can perceive that. And the other point would be that if you need something, then going to Gita, when for at least from my understanding, that we should not express our need, all right? We should accept the situation. I know that hunger is not something easy, especially for children, but in a broader sense, the idea that when we need something, we become needy of something. It relates to this material thing, all right? So to another level, all right? Not saying that you need something. So when he forgot, in fact, he didn't need. That's some of my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. Now, what I want to do is to connect. Firstly, I want to do something on Gita itself. So it's been some time now that we finished Gita with Yogeshwar. If anybody has anything that they would like to bring up about Gita, they're welcome to do that. So that's one line that we can pursue. The second line we can pursue is to compare what we are doing with Gospel of John with Bhagavad Gita. There was lots of comments yesterday about Gita, surprisingly very large comments. Many people talked about that. Oh, this is like this in Bhagavad Gita, or I got this from Bhagavad Gita and it's there here too. So those are the two things that we can do. I am leaning towards the second one because I think it's a way of integrating. I think people understand Gospel of John very well here. There are many people who do. So maybe we can see where they see Bhagavad Gita. For example, in this scene, what do you see? The parallels between this and the chapter 13 we are studying. But in general, what are the parallels between Gospel of John and Bhagavad Gita? So if anybody wants to share on that, we can start with that. Evanik?
So the similarities that I see between the Gita and the Gospel of John, first thing I thought is the friendship between Arjuna and Krishna, and between John and Jesus. And something that Ron said yesterday really impacted me is that John was in awe that Jesus loved him. That's why he kept referring to himself as the one who Jesus loved. And he was in awe of that. And I thought of Arjun and Krishna, and Arjun was in awe that Krishna was his friend, and that Krishna was so great, just like Jesus is so great, that he takes the time to love a human being. And so when I looked at that, it helped me look at my relationship with God and be like, well, God loves me so much. And just being in awe of that and really thinking about that. Like, if you think about it, whether you believe in Jesus or you believe in Krishna or you believe in, Allah or anything right like that, right? And you think of the creation story, God created us, or a higher power created us as human beings. If you think about it, one of my friends is a scientist, and he said being a scientist helped him to believe in the higher power, because when he studied the human body and all of its functions, there was no way, he said, that a higher power didn't create this. It's too complex to leave to man. I mean, or to leave to chance. That it just came out like a Big Bang theory and that's it. Like, it's just too complicated to have the ecosystem that supports life, all different types of life. And you think about, and I was reading Genesis and this morning in the creation story, and you see, and God so loved the world, right? In that he created this, from this vast space, he created a whole ecosystem, night, day, water, plants, food to sustain all the life on earth. And that's the message of Jesus, that Jesus loved, God loves, Krishna loves. And the second thing I thought of was when Krishna allowed Arjun to see his greatness. He gave him his eyes. And I was thinking of the transfiguration, right? Where they were allowed to see Jesus for who he really is in all of his glory. And how special that relationship has to be in order to do that. And how vulnerable you have to be, and how vulnerable Krishna and Jesus had to be to create that friendship with human beings. And I just thought that's the beauty of friendship, is vulnerability. And when you love someone, you can be totally open and honest with them and know that, they're going to reciprocate that, or they're going to love you, to reveal everything that you are. And, when we were talking last night about John laying on Jesus's chest and listening to his words, and I thought of, again, the whole Gita, of the conversation between Krishna and Arjun. Arjun is like right there with him, like, so close to him. And he's telling them, he's really like talking to Arjun. And I was just like amazed by it. So those are the parallels that I'm going to start with. But yeah, those are the parallels that I see.
Wonderful. Thank you, Evanik. And you can circle back. And I'm going to invite everybody is welcome to share this. So I want to make one comment. This is so difficult, so interesting to talk about. I'm thinking of relationship between Krishna and Arjun on one hand, and that of Jesus and John on the other, or Jesus and apostles on the other. It's very interesting. Like, see, Krishna and Arjun have grown up together as kids. They've been playing. So for Arjun's point of view, Krishna is his friend. Okay, he doesn't really notice that he's God in the beginning, from the beginning. So just like Jesus, Krishna is 100% God and 100% man. The interaction between Arjun And Krishna starts with that 100% man part. Remember, towards the end of Gita, Arjun starts to say, wait a minute, you are God, and I have treated you as equal. I have treated you as a friend. And I must have been tremendously unjust to you because you are God. And I'm realizing it now. Whereas in case of Jesus, it is the other way around. The fact that he is God is apparent to John when John the Baptist says, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. And he starts to follow, he and one other apostle starts to, goes to Jesus. Jesus says, what do you seek? And their answer is, where are you staying? And he says, come and see. And they go and they stay with him. Okay, so look at the whole thing, the fact that he's God. And then in the foot washing scene, he is saying that actually you are a child of God too. That's so initially he is God, and he's saying, everybody is saying, like Peter is saying, look, you're the master, I am the servant. You are the teacher, I am the student. How can you wash my feet? Right? Whereas Jesus is saying, no, there is, when you have the Holy Spirit in you, you are a child of God and you are equal to me. And I want to welcome you as an equal, as a friend, not as a servant. And I want to teach you to be that. So to learn of divinity within you and then within everybody else. So it is a very interesting progression of how it proceeds. Thank you, Evanik. Folks, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. You're welcome to make any parallels that you see. Joe.
You just took like a lot of what I was really, that's exactly what I was thinking about. So, all right. So let me say it. So let me just say something, maybe a little bit. Okay. One way of thinking about this as well, and I thought about this recently, is that both Arjun and the apostles are not ready. And so that they're not ready. They're both in a place where they need to find their souls, their hearts. They need to act with a pure heart. And that's the purity of their hearts is another important point in this in the process. In the Gospel of John throughout, I mean, it's kind of highlighted, but especially during the Last Supper, those, with a pure heart. And then, and I think of Arjun as something it's this idea that he's a man of action, right? A man of action for action's sake. And that's a very important point. That is somebody that has a pure heart. But there's this deep discovery of understanding yourself in this process, and that both the apostles and Arjun go through. They in different ways, but they go through in a very, very deep way. And in the end, they have choices to make, and some of them fail. Obviously, Judas, Peter. They fail, one worse than the other, but and so that and I'm also the idea that Christ has given them an example to live by and serve. You know, Arjun's got to pick up his weapon and understand why he's doing it. And it's kind of this, it's the same journey. They're on the same journey. They really are. And what they're doing ultimately, what Krishna and Christ are doing is they're liberating us. They're liberating us from ourselves and liberating us from our desires, from our distortions of reality, from ultimately the truth. You know, what is the truth? You know, what is the right thing to do? I mean, and so that's what, you know, and that journey, and it's funny because we talked separately about kind of how this I've been looking at it differently, the Gospel of John differently since reading it. I see it more as a conversation. Even in the Gospel of John, then in the Gita, it was clear to me it was always a conversation. But the Gospel of John, I always thought it was more of a kind of father-son relationship, almost, in a sense that like kind of dictating but it isn't. It's a conversation. Everybody has to arrive to find themselves, find their own souls, determine what right action is. And the key is that we all have a choice. We all have a choice in the matter. You know, we have the choice to accept grace ultimately. And it's true in both these works. Those are my initial things that I'm thinking of too, because then we can get to the deep, the one thing that Gita really still does, I feel, in a much deeper way, is come up with the practical applications and the paths that you can take with the yogs. I think that is a very practical path. When you think of, you know, karma yoga, gnana yoga, you know, what's the easiest? The Bible gives you examples, but it doesn't necessarily give you, and the disciplines have evolved out of Christianity in order paths to finding a pure heart, but it's not as clear in the scripture as it is with the Gita.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so I'll leave it
Thank
there.
you. Thank you. Joe, you can cycle back and keep adding more things later.
Yeah, I have
Um,
notes. I could go.
Excellent. So I want to comment on several things. I'm going to be talking a little bit here. So first, I have following points. One, about comparison of Arjun and Sudama. You know, what is the relationship between Krishna and Arjun on one hand and Krishna and Sudama on the other hand? That's one point. The second point is about the point that Joe is making about the purity of heart and discovery of your own self. Third is I want to make a side point about Peter that I did not make yesterday. It's very interesting. And the fourth point is about the conversation in Gospel of John as being the conversation too. And fifth point is about yogas. So these are the 5 points I want to make. I'll make some of them now, and I'll keep on inserting them as we go along. I'll add to them. So firstly, it's really interesting to see the relationship between Krishna and Arjuna on one hand and Krishna and Sudama on one hand. Both of them actually come to Krishna looking for something, asking for something. Now, Sudama is not explicitly asking, but it doesn't work that way. Krishna is Krishna. He knows the intention of, just like the Gospel of John says, he knew men. Men don't have to tell him what they're seeking. He knows. So both go to Krishna asking for something. And Krishna gives it to them. The story in Krishna Arjuna is far more complex than Krishna and Sudama. What is it that, and why does Krishna do this? He's actually judging them. He is saying, are you pure of heart? Do you really want this? And then everything is yours. It's the same pattern in Gospel of John. What they want is different. Like Arjun is looking to figure out what he should do in this war. What's the right thing to do? What's the moral thing to do? Sudama is trying to say, okay, how can I help my family? That's what he's trying to do. And so I think the parallels are very, very interesting. And what really, again, when you read Gita, it says, just be devoted to me. That's it. Everything else comes, and then different forms are there of doing things. But it's that devotion which is the crucial thing. I want to make a point about Peter just to get a little bit more context into Gospel of John. Peter denies Jesus thrice. And what I realized is that he actually denies him twice. 2 times he does that. First is when Jesus is about to wash his feet. First he says, Lord, do you wash my feet? He's basically saying, look, I know what needs to be done. This is not what should be done. How do you know what needs to be done? You are washing my feet? That is not right. So he's denying what Jesus knows. And then after Jesus explains, what I'm doing to you, you do not understand now, but afterwards you will understand. What is his reaction? You shall never wash my feet. He's again denying what Jesus is doing. And Jesus answered him, if I do not wash you, you have no share with me. And what is his reaction? Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Now this way again seemed to be saying, okay, he's now agreeing, but no. He's saying, you have to wash the whole thing now. Again, Jesus has to explain. The one who has bathed doesn't need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean, and you are clean, but not every one of you. So it's very interesting that he's actually denying what Jesus is, what he knows. Even here. So there's just an aside. All right. Next up, I'll weave in the other points as I go along. Next up is Brian. Brian.
So I did notice a difference between the 2 stories, Jesus and Krishna. Jesus ties it into a lesson and actually and a commandment. People even taught the new commandment that, and he says it really twice in 2 different ways. Right as he's washing the feet, or he just finished, he said, so if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet. And then he says later on, that's going to come up yet in our discussions, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another just as I have loved you. And there's no commandment or anything like that, at least in the Sudama story that you related. I don't know what to make of that, but it's that seems to be a difference.
Wonderful. Thank you. Penny, you had something?
Yeah, I was just thinking of Jesus and Krishna and the Sudama story. And I was thinking how Jesus took care of the needs of people, like the physical needs. He healed them, he killed the blind, the lame, he made walk. Like at the wedding, he he produced wine because they were running out of wine at the wedding. And Lazarus, who was, a deep friend of his, died, and he even raised him up from the dead. But I couldn't imagine Jesus making a new house for Sudama. It just doesn't seem, we're saying his kingdom is of the, not of this earth. So I could imagine him taking care of the family, but I couldn't imagine him, taking care of, like setting him up in a nice new house.
Thank you, Penny. So I will say a couple of things. I see the equivalence between the idea of this new commandment that you will love one another, but more fundamentally, it is you will love God, you will love Jesus, and you will love each other just like that. So it's basically the commandment is to love God is the primary thing, and basically that God is there in everybody, so you love everybody. The version of that in Bhagavad Gita is that be devoted only to me. So be devoted to the center. And that combined with the idea of namaste, it is the same, it is the same version. So it's like the bhakti yoga. So that commandment is what bhakti yoga is all about. That is, in Indian context, you wouldn't call it a commandment, but that is what is good. That is what you should do. That is another way of saying, I think, the same thing. So there is the equivalence between these two. The point about yogas are very, very interesting. So we'll come to that, but I'm going to keep commenting on some things, and I'm going to keep things pending for more. So let's go with Rupali and then Evanik. Rupali, go ahead.
Hi. So I wanted to just touch upon a couple of things that Evanik, Joe, and Brian, Penny have all said. One of the things is when you have the devotion and completely believe. We've seen this in Gita. I really don't know much about the Gospel of John, so I can't comment on that. That you are transformed, your life is transformed. The more you practice Gita, the closer you are to the center, and things just start to happen. So in the story of Sudama, his devotion to Krishna, so whether there was a physical palace or not, the idea is that there was a transformation. His life got better. And I think that is the lesson behind it, but it's put in a concrete way for us to understand that, oh yeah, there was a transformation of his life. It got better. And the other part that I wanted to talk about was the relationship of both Sudama and Arjuna to Krishna, that they were good friends. And the relationship between God and the devotee is that of a friendship. So not of being unequal, but the God in you is the God in me, that we are part of the universe, part of everything. So I think that's highlighted in both the stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Rupali. I want to make one comment, and then I will pass it to Evanik. And if anybody else would like to comment on anything, go ahead and type exclamation mark. So I want to talk about the point that Joe made about his realizing that Gospel of John is also a conversation. And it is very fundamentally a conversation, because like Jesus always asks people, like, what are you seeking? It's like, it has to come from you. You have to ask, then you will get something. And it's a two-way thing. People say all kinds of things to him, things to him, and he will respond to that. So there is this entire conversation he's having. It's not a one-on-one conversation, but it is a whole series of conversations with a whole series of people. Now, if you look at Mahabharata as a whole, Krishna is talking to everybody. He's talking to many, 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 many people. He's talking to good people. He's talking to bad people. That also is a conversation. Him saying to, Pharisees that you have eyes, but you do not see. Even when you see a person who has made a person who is blind from birth see, you can't see the fact that somebody has done that, even though you have eyes. And so it's a back and forth that is going on throughout. And that is related to the point that Joe was making about purity of heart and discovery of yourself. The way in which some of these apostles are learning about this is through a conversation. Now, when you go further into the New Testament, like you read Paul, whether it is Romans or Ephesians, you have Paul describing to people. He is having a conversation with people. So just like Jesus is having a conversation with the apostles, now the apostles are having conversations with people. And so this transmission of love is happening through conversation. It is not one-way process. It is, grace is going one way, but the devotion has to go the other way to complete the loop. You have to ask for it. Again, I think Ron's point about John was so amazing, so amazing. The point that he made was throughout the Gospel of John, John refers to himself as the disciple that Jesus loved. Now, at first reading, it seems that John is saying, Jesus loves me more. But no, actually, it is that Jesus is actually loving everybody, including Judas, whom he knows is going to betray him. He's loving everybody. But John is the one who notices it, who values it, who thinks it is amazing. And he puts his identity itself is, I am the one who Jesus loves. So it is a way of accepting the grace. So it is John saying yes to Jesus. He's the one who is saying yes to the grace that is raining on him. All right, next up is going to be Ebonique.
So 2 points that I wanted to make. When Joe talked about freedom and that both scriptures, both texts offer that. And I was thinking, as a Christian, when you're participating in an institutionalized religion and they say freedom in Christ, you're like, what are you talking about? There's all these restrictions. There's all these things that you can't do. Like, how is that freeing for you? But when you study it from the perspective of the Gita doesn't really restrict anything. It just points out like what choices you make and the consequences of those choices. And I think in a sense, the actual Bible does that too. It's like, if you take certain actions, you will get certain consequences in your life. And you choose that when you take those actions. And one of the things I think about what Joe was talking about, it being freedom from desires and, freedom from desires, and he said something else and I forgot. Sorry, Joe. But I think of that and I'm like, And I always had a problem, like even with Gita when they used to say that, like freedom from desires. But what I understood by studying the Gita is that the freedom from desires means freedom from anything that doesn't bring you closer to yourself. And you can desire all these things, like you can desire relationships, but why? You can desire things like marriage, but you have to ask yourself why. Like, what are you trying to get from it? And if it's something that's going to, like, if you have a partner that is also about bringing you to the center and them getting to the center, it works for you. But if the relationship or if a friendship or if anything takes you away, you have to cut it, like form follows function, right? In Louis Sullivan terms, you know, you're free from that. Like that's what Christ offers you, freedom from that. And it's by love that he does that. It's by love that he shows you this. It's by love that he came to this earth to become human, to show you what that's about. And in a sense, it's why Krishna does it, right? Too, like Krishna becomes 100% human for that desire, for that reason, to show us love and to show us who he is, to show Arjuna love. And then one thing, when you were talking about conversation, Shrikant, and Joe was talking about it too. And I remember another thing that I was always taught is that the Bible or the scripture is God's way of talking to us. And I didn't get that until the Gita, right? Because I was like, why do people why do people write these things down? It's because, whatever happened to them spoke to them. This story speaks to them. And in a sense, if you think about creativity, right, it's a spiritual thing. I think we were talking about it when Victor was doing his series on Jordan Peterson and the Bible. We talked about order and chaos, and order being male, chaos being female. And Victor said that chaos is also creativity. So if you think about it, this creativity is meant to speak to us from a spiritual aspect. And it's a God's way of coming through humans to speak. If you look at it that way, it becomes really profound. You can take from it what you need to. You can take from the scripture what you need to bring you to the center. And if for some reason a scripture does not bring you to the center and takes you away from the center, you don't have to, I don't want to say the word disregard, but you don't have to take anything. You don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to take any action with it. If you're reading something in the Bible and it's like, no, okay. If you're reading something in the Gita, you're like, no, it's okay. If it's bringing you away from the center, it's okay. Maybe it's not meant for you at that time. Maybe it's not meant for you ever. It might speak to someone else completely differently. So it does offer, circling back to the point, it does offer freedom to take what you need to bring you to the center and to let go of whatever doesn't bring you towards the center.
Thank you, Avanik. I was noticing one thing. I think all of you people are getting so much from Bhagavad Gita. And I have to tell you, I'm getting a lot from Gospel of John. And the reason for that, I was thinking about this now, is just the unfamiliarity. It's the same themes in many ways. It's really at the core, at a very deep level, it's the same thing, especially when you compare it to what modern thought is, that is in the culture around us. When you compare it to that, both these works are very similar. At the same time, each of these works, as they have grown in the culture, have acquired a whole bunch of habits, institutions, ways of doing, ways of speaking, words, etc. So this entire set of forms that you grow up with, up to a point where you just kind of glaze over when you see those forms. You don't see what those forms are and what they were meant to be. And some of these forms are actually against what the core of the meaning is as well. But in any case, you do not notice the spirit because it is too familiar, it is too usual, so you do not see it. But when you see it in a completely different context, like seeing Indian context sitting in America, or seeing Gospel of John when you've grown up, when you have not grown up with it, you have an external, it's like the Archimedes principle, give me a place to stand and a lever long enough, then I can move the earth. You can actually see the earth if you can put yourself from in a different context. What Gita does for somebody in the West is that it gives you this place to stand from which you can now look at yourself. Otherwise, you're too much kind of caught up in everything around you, and you're not able to make those distinctions. Here, and for me, Gospel of John is doing exactly the same thing. So that's one observation I wanted to make. Next up is Joe. Joe, go ahead.
One of the other things that, and that's an interesting point that you just made. It was a really very interesting point.
Sorry, Joe. Can I interrupt just for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
See, one of the most beautiful things of it is that you see this external context, and so you see some deep points over there. And then once you have done that, you're able to see these deep points in your own culture. So just like all the observations you're making, saying, oh, I didn't know that this was there in Gospel of John. Now, it's not a matter of that you were not familiar with Gospel of John, but because of this point, you're able to see something in something that you're familiar with that you could not see before.
It's really interesting because it cuts through the bias that
Yes.
you have, and it's a very interesting way that I have to think about this some more. But you hear something different, but it's saying something at its core the same, and it allows you to say, oh, well, it allows you to leave all the baggage that you had or may have with the institutions and all the other cultural aspects of things. One other thing that I really think that these two works actually really focus on is letting go of your ego and confronting the ego. I think that that's a very important point, and essentially detaching yourself in different ways, right? So you're detaching yourself in the Gita from just things, from objects, things that pull you away from your center, from what is true, right? In a way, I feel like in the Bible, you're also detaching yourselves from things, but you're just attaching yourself to God, and so I'm not explaining this clearly, but essentially is that that you're giving yourself up to God's will. You're giving things up to God's will in the Bible. You're giving yourself up to Christ's will, and that is in a sense, and you're following his example as a way of serving others, and that is a way of kind of getting rid of your ego. Is detaching yourself from the ego. In order to find yourself in Gita, and specifically, I'm thinking chapter 2. You are detaching yourself from your ego as well, and in order to understand the root causes of your desires. And you're looking at yourself in its deepest form. So there's kind of a parallel there, where I guess they're both confronting the sin of pride in a way. I guess that's the way I'm just thinking myself. I'm just thinking things out loud right now. So, but there is a parallel there. It's a little bit different on how they arrive there, but I do think they both confront the sin of pride.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. I'm going to comment on one other thing that you said earlier. And folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark if you would like to make any comments. Again, I'm speaking about Gospel of John as an outsider, outsider of a culture, of a Christian culture. And so I see things very differently. So for example, Joe was talking about yogas. There are these 4 different yogas, and they have these different ways of doing things. Now, the way I think about it is that what is the equivalent of that in Gospel of John? Actually, it's quite an ingenious way of formulating it, because ultimately it's the way. It's like this is the in Tao Te Ching. This is the way, right? These 4 are 4 ways that are leading you to the same thing. Now, the way in which it works, I think it works in Gospel of John, is that Jesus is the way. So Jesus is a person. So in the person, you have all these 4 things going on. The person is illustrating the right actions, the Karma Yoga. Jesus is illustrating the right emotions of love. That's the Bhakti Yoga. He's illustrating Jnana, the knowledge of the self. He's illustrating Dhyana Yoga, of concentration. Just be concentrated on Brahma or God. But all of them are actually beautifully integrated into a single person that serves as a prototype, which integrates all these 4 things together as a single way. So that's how I see the parallels, that when Jesus says that he's the way actually captures all these 4 things. That you are the dhyan part is not explicit, but the other 3 are very explicit. He says you have to walk, you have to know, that you have to hear the word, you have to feel the love, and then you have to walk. Implicit in all of that is that the attention remains focused on the word. So that's the dhyan part. So it is there implicitly in that. So that's that's the thing I wanted to say. All right. Anybody else wants to bring anything up about the parallels, differences, any thoughts? Okay. Brian, go ahead.
Well, since you did ask for any thoughts,
Yes.
I'll bring in the divine feminine.
Okay.
And that and it's a contrast. It does, and I really liked your last point, by the way. And I think the divine feminine captures those aspects as well. Because they're internal, emotional, intellectual. They're not, we call it internal. They're not external like the law. And in where somebody dictates and you obey. And that's a big difference between the the Old Testament in the Bible and the New Testament. And so I think that's the Old Testament. It tends to be rather patriarchal. The New Testament also is patriarchal, but I think Jesus can be seen as embodying the divine feminine, really perfectly along the way that you just mentioned in the those four different paths. And it's all an internal, it's sensitivities. It's not something that is dictated as a law. So that's just I mean, if we ever get to this in the divine feminine, that's a point I would make, is that Christianity, the history of it is still very patriarchal, especially the institutions and all that. But a lot of the feminine, the divine feminine, is, I'd have to find a better word, but right now the word I got it is sublimated in the figure of Jesus Christ. So that's just another aspect of what
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. I do have comments on that. Let me go with Rupali, and then we'll circle back to this issue of divine feminine. Rupali, go ahead.
So I was wondering why you chose this story about Krishna and Sudama. And now, when you mentioned about the foot washing, because I was wondering, out of all the stories, why did you choose this? So do you want to elaborate? Is there more than the foot washing in here?
Okay, that's a good question. I mean, firstly, I want to highlight one thing that you said implicitly. Mahabharata has so many stories, and you really need to take in all of them to get a sense of it. And a sense of the ideas. Gita is statement of principles. Those principles are illustrated through this entire mass of stories. The reason I chose this story was simply because of God washes man's feet. That's really the key idea, and the idea of equality which is there, that Jesus is presenting, demonstrating with that. And that is there in Krishna and Sudama story in a very powerful way. So that's why I chose that. But a little bit later, I want to talk a little bit about, and with your help, hopefully, Rupali, of Mahabharata stories, maybe a little bit about Mahabharata stories to add the context. But before that, I want to speak to what Brian was saying about the divine feminine. There is all kinds of stuff that happens to ideas. They go one way or the other especially when they become institutionalized. Something gets more emphasized as opposed to the other. I found an amazing portrayal in Jnaneshwar, one of his lesser work. Jnaneshwari is his most famous work by far, but he has written another treatise which is much more philosophical about his own thoughts. It's called Amrutanubhav, and the first chapter of it is just stunning, because it is about what he calls Shiva and Shakti. Now, I'm not going to be able to talk about it because it's such a deep topic. So I'm going to just attempt to point to what kind of things it is, and then maybe I recommend that you read it. Rupali, if you could type in Amrutam Nubhav in the chat. Appreciate that. By Naneshwar. You can just type in Google. Just want people to know what the spelling is, and then they can find it themselves. Now, the idea is profound. It is the idea of Purusha and Prakriti. Shiva, which is, Lord Shiva, he and Shakti is his wife. And the universe is basically Purusha and Prakriti, or Shiva and Shakti. Together make up, universe is the child of Shiva and Shakti. So this is, on one hand, this is Advaita. So that means it's all one, like Shiva and Shakti are one. And it is showing you the manifestation and the principle and how they play together. And the really profound principle here is that Shiva, the universal principle, cannot but manifest itself into Shakti. And Shakti draws all its movement and all its kind of force from Shiva. And it is the love of Shiva for the Shakti. So the seer in love with what is being seen, and the seen also in love with the seer. So there is this loop of continuous creation and destruction that is going on between the center and the periphery. So the periphery in this sense is part of life. This is like form and function. Function is Shiva, and form is Shakti. And the Shakti, the forms actually support the function. And so there is this continuous loop. And they cannot really be apart from each other. So this is the divine masculine and divine feminine in a dance. And universe is the product of this dance. They're not separate, they're inseparable. They are one in this way. And one can't exist without the other. And it is captured by Naneshwar with such amazingly beautiful metaphors. This is Advait philosophy. This is, it's called Kashmiri Shaivism. That is where it comes from. It's the most beautiful version of the integration of the center and the periphery, the masculine and the feminine, that I have seen in Indian context. It's a very short work, maybe it's just the first chapter. You just need to read the first chapter. It's called Shiva and Shakti of this Amrutanubhav. It is quite accessible. I'm going to find the link for you with the English translation. So that I think would be a really, really amazing thing to look at. So, okay, I'm going to now open it up for any comments on this part or any other part. We'll go with, let me see, Rupali has already spoken. So, Joe.
I don't know if Brian was going to say something, but
Brian, very no.
Go
ahead.
Okay. I was wondering actually briefly if you could repeat the one part of the Sudama story where they were in the woods and there was the flood, it was mentioned by, I didn't get that part of it clearly. And I think that there may be something that really important within that, if there's the element of forgiveness.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay, let me see. Is Madhav around?
no, I think he,
Okay, he left. Okay, Rupali, do you know
Could
anything
I-
about it? Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's actually not a flood, it's a storm. So what happens is when Sudama and Krishna are at the Gurukul, the teacher's wife is making food for them, and she doesn't have dry wood to cook the food on. And so Krishna and Sudama go to the forest to cut the wood, and there is a storm. They get caught in a storm. Now, when they're caught in the storm, Sudama is very scared. He's afraid, and Krishna says, "I'm with you. So don't be scared. Don't be afraid." And Sudama is then swept up by a demoness, and she's very scary, and Sudama is terrified. And Krishna says, "Be brave," and he saves Sudama from the demoness, and he kills her, and then they both come back with dry wood to the school again. So that's the story. But again, another place where if we are caught in a situation where we are afraid, we'll just believe that you have the courage and be brave. I think those are lessons to take from it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Rupali. All right. Let me just check here. Hold on. Okay. Anybody else wants to comment on anything? Okay. In which case, what I will do is, let me see if I can do this. Okay, I just want to read this. If this is the right one. Just a second. Hold on. I'm trying to figure out the right thing to share here. Okay, let me see if I can open this. Okay, you can see 13th century. Hold on. Google Chrome. Is this the right one? Okay, you see the screen? Okay, let me try something. Okay, here, make it a little bit bigger. And let's go to this. So I just want to show you what this thing can do. Hold on, let me just here. I find it incredibly beautiful. So I'm going to just read this and would love to see what others think. Let me go back here. Let me move it down here. I think it is here. Okay, I'm going to go further. Okay. Okay, so this is just a quick reading of this chapter. It'll probably take about 15 minutes, I think, 10 minutes. So I just want to read this out. This is Naneshwar. I put the link in chat. Give me a second. I'm going to use this. Okay, I think I just get a little bit of this. This is very, very deep. Okay, the union of Shiva and Shakti. I offer obeisance to the god Shiva and the goddess Shakti, the limitless primal parents of the universe. So universe is a child. The lover, out of boundless love, has become the beloved. So Shiva has become Shakti. The Purusha has become Prakriti. The center has become periphery. Both are made out of the same substance and share the same food. Out of love for each other, they merge. And again, they separate for the pleasure of being two. They're not entirely the same, nor are they not the same. We cannot say exactly what they are. Their one desire is to enjoy each other. Yet they never allow their unity to be disturbed, even as a joke. They are so averse to separation that even their child, the universe, does not disturb their union. Though they perceive the universe of inanimate and animate creation emanating from themselves, they do not recognize a third. They sit together on the same ground, wearing the same garment of light. From the past remembrance, united in bliss. Difference itself merges. Difference itself merged in their sweet union. When seeing their intimacy, it could find no duality to enjoy. Because of God, the goddess exists. And without her, he is not. They exist only because of each other. How sweet is their union. The whole world is too small to contain them. Yet they live happily in the smallest particle. They regard each other as their own self, and neither creates so much as a blade of grass without the other. These two are the only ones who dwell in this home called the universe. When the master of the house sleeps, the mistress stays awake and performs the functions of both. When he awakes, the whole house disappears and nothing at all is left. They being two for the purpose of diversity, and both are seeking each other for the purpose of becoming one. Each is the object to the other, and both are subjects to each other. Only when together do they enjoy happiness. It is Shiva alone who lives in all forms. He is both male and female. It is because of the union of these two complements that the whole universe exists. Two lutes, one note. Two flowers, one fragrance. Two lamps, one light. Two lips, one word. Two eyes, one sight. These two, one universe. Though manifesting duality, these two, the eternal pair, are eating from the same dish. The Shakti, endowed with chastity and fidelity, cannot live without her Lord. And without her, the doer of all cannot appear. Since he appears because of her, and she exists because of her Lord, the two cannot be distinguished at all. Sugar and its sweetness cannot be separated from one another, nor can camphor and its fragrance. If there are flames, there is also the fire. If we catch hold of Shakti, we have Shiva as well. The sun appears to shine because of its rays, but it is the sun itself which produces the rays. In fact, that glorious sun and its shining are one and the same. To have a reflection, one must have an object. If we see a reflection, then we infer that an object exists. Likewise, the supreme reality, which is one, appears to be two. Through her, the absolute void becomes the manifest world, but her existence is derived from her Lord. Shiva himself became his beloved, but without her presence, no universe exists. Because of her form, God is seen as the world, but he created her form of himself. Embarrassed by her formless husband and her own graceful form, she adorned him with a universe of myriad names and forms. In unity, there is little to behold. So she, the mother of abundance, brought forth the world as a play. She made evident the glory of her Lord by spreading out her own body form, and he made her famous by concealing himself. He takes the role of the witness out of love of watching her. But when her appearance is withdrawn, the role of witness is abandoned as well. Through her, he assumes the form of the universe. Without her, he is left naked. Although he is manifest, he himself cannot be seen. It is only because of her that he appears as universal form. When he is awakened by her, Shiva perceives the world. Then he enjoys this dish she serves, as well as she who serves. While he sleeps, she gives birth to the animate and the inanimate worlds. When she rests, her husband disappears. When he conceals himself, he cannot be discovered without her grace. They are as mirrors, each to the other. When he embraces her, it is his own bliss that Shiva enjoys. He is the enjoyer of everything. But there is no enjoyment without her. She is his form, but her beauty comes from him. By their intermingling, they are together enjoying this feast. Shiva and Shakti are the same, like air and its motion, or like gold and its luster. Fragrance cannot be separated from musk, nor heat from fire. Neither can Shakti be separated from Shiva. If night and day were to approach the sun, both would disappear. In the same way, their duality would vanish if their essential unity were seen. In fact, the duality of Shiva and Shakti cannot exist in that primal unitive state from which Om emanates. Nyandev says, I honor the primal pair of Shiva and Shakti, who, by swallowing up the sweet dish of name and form, reveal their undying unity. Embracing each other, they merge into one. As darkness merges into light at the breaking of dawn, all levels of speech, from para to vaikari, merge into silence when their true nature is realized. Just as the ocean and the Ganges both merge into the primal waters when the universal deluge comes, then the air, along with its motion, merges into the universal air. The sun, along with its brilliance, merges into the eternal fire at that time. Likewise, while attempting to see Shiva and Shakti, both the seer and his vision disappear. Again and again, I offer salutations to that universal pair. They are like a stream of knowledge from which a knower cannot drink unless he gives himself up. When such is the case, if I remain separate in order to honor them, it is only a pretended separation. My homage is like that of a golden ornament, worshipping gold. When my tongue says word tongue, Is there any difference between the organ that utters the word and the object signified by that word? Although the Ganges and ocean are different, when they commingle, are their waters not the same? The sun is both the source and the object of illumination. Still, it is only one. If moonlight illuminates the moon, or if the lamp is revealed by its own light, is there any separation here? When the luster of a pearl plays upon itself, it only enhances itself. Is the sound Om divided into three simply because it contains three letters? Or is the letter N divided into three because it has three lines by which it is formed? So long as the unity is undisturbed and a graceful pleasure is thereby derived, why should not the water find delight in the floral fragrance of its own rippled surface? It is in this manner I bow to the inseparable Shiva and Shakti. A reflected image vanishes. When the mirror is taken away, the ripples on the water vanish. When the wind becomes still, a man returns to himself. When he awakens from the sleep, likewise, I have perceived God and Goddess by waking from my ego. When salt dissolves in ocean, it becomes one with the ocean. When my ego dissolved, I became one with Shiva and Shakti. I have paid homage to Shiva and Shakti by uniting with them, just as when the outer covering of the hollow banyan tree is removed, the inner space becomes united with the outer. Thank you, folks. Does anybody want to say something? Welcome to do that.
Oh, that was amazing.
Yeah, it is the best statement of the Tao and the manifestation, or, Purusha and Prakriti that I've ever seen. Rupali, go ahead.
Yeah, it was beautifully recited, as well as, it's such a lovely composition. And every stanza and every metaphor in there was so beautiful, very beautifully illustrated. While you were reading, I could see images of yin and yang at
Yes.
some point. At some point, I felt that there was just joy, like a dance of things. You could feel movement in those lyrics. So, wow, it was just beautiful.
Yeah, it's absolutely, and I think you're pointing to, yin and yang, and more than that, it's like combination of Tao and the world. It's like Tao and the world dance with yin and yang. So it's like, you can think of it as, like, in the Chinese culture, it's like a family. It's like, I think of it as father and the son, and then there is the daughter, youngest daughter, Toi, I think, and then Chen, which is the eldest son, which is Thunder. So it's like you have this dance going on between all of these, and it's one thing, it's one family, and they all work with each other. They all love each other, and they're all interacting in order to make things happen. And when you focus on one, all the others are there in the background. The other is there in the background. So, and Naneshwar's ability of describing is just stunning. Next up is Avanik.
I just thought of balance as you were reading. It's and in particular when you started reading the beginning about the God and the goddess. That's what I thought in my head. But creating the universe, and how when one is awake, when one is awake, when the feminine is awake, she's taking care of the house, and They can't, they work together to create a blade of grass, like the minuscule things. Like it's just the detail. And I just think of balance, and it's like they need each other, like they need to do things together. I just kept thinking throughout balance.
Wonderful. Thank you. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to reiterate the same thing. That story was it was incredible, and I it's balance, but it's amazing how I just pick up, and this is coming back from a Western culture background. I pick up on how the feminine is highlighted. And it's not highlighted in a superiority. It's a balance, but it's resonating more with me. And how he's naked without her at night, and I mean just the words of everything, just how intertwined they are. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It really is beautiful. I mean, it's mesmerizing to a certain extent. I love that. Anyway, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for reading that.
Thank you. Thank you. And I have
Reading
put
it
it
so
in the chat.
beautifully.
Well, thank
too.
you. I have put it in the chat. So, and it's very, I mean, the thing that really stunned me is how accessible it is, how easy it is to understand what he's saying. Next up is Rupali.
So when you read the part about the blades of grass, it reminded me of Whitman's collection of poems, Leaves of Grass. And I wonder, how much he must have read or was familiar with these works from India. I know that he was well read about Indian philosophy and spirituality. So that just kind of brought a memory to me.
Absolutely. I mean, I think he's profoundly influenced by transcendentalism. It's the same with, you can see this in Louis Sullivan. Like this dance, this is just dance of form and function, function and form. Like function is Shiva, form is Shakti. And they actually follow each other, actually. It's a loop that goes on and on. And it's just, and again, the basis of Louis Sullivan is also transcendentalism. Transcendentalism is just taking Indian philosophy and actually integrating it into Western thought in a very deep way, deep and original way, so that it actually lives. So, and that's why there is that power to that poetry of Whitman or writing of Emerson or the works of Louis Sullivan. All right. Anybody else?
Can I just add?
Please.
So at the beginning of this meetup, I mentioned that we just did the creation story in Montessori. So Maria Montessori, when she wrote her curriculum, she created this story, and it's called God with No Hands. And it's about the creation of the world. So she talks about from the Big Bang till now. And the children actually perform all the experiments to start from the Big Bang, going all the way to where the Earth is formed. And they get actually the physical idea of the creation of the Earth. Now, when they get into upper elementary and middle school levels, then children start to think, okay, what is the meaning of that story? And we also read creation stories from different cultures. And one of the things that comes across in all of these creation stories, we look at common elements, and there is the chaos and order, female and male, the positive, negative. There is some magic or some kind of disaster that has happened, and things have come together. So children kind of learn these ideas through the creation stories. And when you were reading the poem Shiva and Shakti, I just was able to see like how even the whole creation story is all about how we are made and how we are formed, or how things around us are formed. And we forget that in somehow being too analytical, I suppose, that we forget this basis. I just thought that Maria Montessori was great in bringing this into the classroom in a very nice way. And she calls it the dance of the elements, where, and the chart is with, things going up and down, like the elements that were lighter went up, the elements that were heavier went down, and there was this dance going on. And so I feel, that whole creation story is beautifully written, and this poem reminded me of it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rupali. One of my favorite parts of this is when he switches gear and starts talking about himself. Realize, it's not like spectator watching this dance between Shiva and Shakti, but that is part of you. That is you as well. So you have this dance taking place within you, and you are living in this dance. So I thought that was beautiful. All right, folks. So I think this is going to be good. We've got these monthly meetups, so please bring up anything. I would recommend this work. I've read only one chapter because I really like this first chapter, and this is the entire chapter. And there is just so much there that I'm not able to go forward. The entire book is very short. It's probably like 180. I don't know how much it is. But it's I want to say, it's maybe about 10 times as much as I read, and that's it. It's very short. So I think I spent about 12 minutes reading it. So the whole thing is 120 minutes or something like that. So it's well worth it. And I thought that this translation did an excellent job. I found it more easier than some of the Marathi translations I was reading to describe it. So I think this is an unusually good translation. So that's what is going on. This Sunday we have Frankenstein. We are alternating between Frankenstein and Faust. There should be a clever way of talking about this, which I can't think of yet. But it's going between Frankenstein and Faust. That's what we do on Sundays at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And we're going to have Mark Stallman and Fred Butler back for the next 2 lectures. There is no lecture this Sunday, but the next 2 Sundays are going to be very special. The Sunday after this one is going to be on new thinking, which is about using all 4 causes. You know what? Let me make this point. Brian, yesterday you were making a very interesting point about plan and this one. Whether you're betraying the plan or whether you're betraying the person. And this is something that I thought of afterwards. I'm a little slow. So I thought of it afterwards. Most modern way of thinking about anything is analytical. You're always trying to break things down, and you're focusing mostly on material causes and efficient causes. So for example, and I think the approach that you've taken to Bhagavad Gita, that you took to Bhagavad Gita, of kind of letting that whole Bhagavad Gita sit as a whole, trying to take in as a whole and trying to kind of give a place for it within your consciousness, actually listening to it, and then slowly letting it work on you. I think that is the right way of understanding. And that's what, Eric Auerbach was saying as well, that you have to kind of take that in. So one of the big distinctions between, let's take just the Odysseus way of thinking about plan and person. See, Odysseus is always planning. When his feet are being washed, he's always saying, with these people, what am I going to do? And how am I going to do it? That's how he's calculating. So he's focused on the material, the people, and what are you going to do? So the efficient. So efficient and material is what the dominant is. And so is there when you kind of think of things as plans. But when you look at Gospel of John, or when you look at Bhagavad Gita, it is the final and formal which is shaping everything. So final in this case is God the Father. That's where you're going. That's your home. Formal is Jesus as a person that is showing the way. That is a formal cause. And the efficient, because most people, when they think of plan, it is always in the efficient context of transforming the material. Whereas the way in which Gospel of John presents it as a person of Jesus, that is the form, which is trying to get you to the final. And that is actually shaping your efficient, which is in this case, love, the motivation in you to do things. And then the material, which is what you're going to actually do, the physical life. So it is using all four causes in order to make its presentation, with the final being there in the background, God the Father, and formal being the main actor. And this is dramatically different from any kind of presentation that you will see in the modern times. So it takes a while to kind of adjust to that. That's what is going on. So that's what I wanted to say. I don't know whether any of this makes sense. Brian, what do you think?
It makes sense. It's not what I had in mind, but I think that makes, I mean, yeah, it makes what you said makes a lot of sense, but it goes much further than I was thinking.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. So just wanted to, respond to you, though one day late. So thank you. All right, folks, this has been so good, and we will continue this. And again, thanks for Evanique and David for being the backup for these meetups. Really appreciate that. And we will continue with Gita. I don't want to lose touch with Gita, and we will do something special every time, or we can just have a discussion. So we'll do kind of combinations of things, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much, everybody. Rupali, great you could make it this time. Bye.
Bye.